have no gavel, so it's 7 o'clock. Call the meeting to order.
Where's the flag?
I don't see a flag,
Move the chair.
so
You can give me a kick.
I guess we will not
Thank
pledge.
you.
Mike? Okay.
Just to give you an update on the special town meeting article, to change the day of the election, still waiting for information from town council on that, and the selectmen haven't voted on that yet, so.
Okay. So they didn't vote last Thursday on that? No. And is there a window that town council is looking at, or?
To, as far as when to have the election, yeah, that's what we wanna make sure, if we have it, say, like April 2nd, is that okay with timelines and everything else?
Does it have to be in April? Can it be the first weekend in May? Because if you do April, you run into Easter. Possible.
Passover.
Yeah. Okay.
We'll see what she says.
Yeah.
And just on the fall town meeting warrant, there is a petition article from Bob Kimball on school enrollment assessment study, and Bob is here
Yep.
to speak on that.
Get you first. Evening, folks. I assume we've all seen a copy of the article warrant. I want to start off by saying that, the intent here is not, from the get-go, to close this school. That's not my intention. That's not the reason behind this proposal. As we all know, we've been talking about a new building for the town hall and the community building for the council on aging. And it's become obvious to me, talking to people in the neighborhoods, that people aren't interested in talking about a building if they think that we may have one already that could be utilized for one or both of those buildings. So in order to determine that, we have to spend some money to find out whether or not that's true or not. So the whole purpose behind the petition is basically just to do the assessment based on future needs. We'll include an RFQ, a long-range enrollment forecast, 30-year 2030, a survey of existing buildings to determine the needs for the district's capacity in relation to planned educational programs, and a cost analysis assigned each of the schools along with a cost assessment to consolidate the buildings if necessary. So, been going through some of the information I have through the Department of Education and through the various places I've been able to come up with information. I keep finding conflicting numbers. Nothing matches. Enrollment numbers don't match. Birth rates don't match. Nothing seems to match no matter whichever agency you go through. So, looking at this for a long-range program is to me, is a logical thing to do. There may be a number of projections that we'll have to project on. Most of the reports I'm looking at are looking in hindsight. They're not looking forward, they're looking backwards. And obviously none of us have a crystal ball and can figure out what's going to happen in the future. There are some determinations that enrollments will continue to drop in future years. Norton's not the only one. It's everywhere, and it will continue to do so. There are reports that were generated from the schools outside themselves that indicate that their space needs requirements are being filled, and there's additional space that could be utilized for other town agencies. So it's right in the report. So that raises yet another question. Do we need to have 5 existing schools? Now, obviously, the high school and the middle school, they're probably pretty much out of it, but when you look at the 3 elementary schools, those are the ones you want to take a look at. So the request is to spend $45,000 to have an unbiased outside agency come in, look at these schools and make a determination. If they say, yes, we need the schools, I'm all for it. If they say no, then it's up to others besides me to determine whether or not they want to utilize the school space or not. Without maybe taking the entire building, maybe just taking a portion of the building. I don't know. I don't have the answers. That's what I'm looking for. So obviously the birth rates have dropped. I was talking to President Haino. We went to a community forum with him about 2 months ago. And they were talking at the college level what it's taken today to fill their requirements for freshmen coming in for college. And one of the comments he made was until the year 2030, they continue to know that every single year they'll have a decrease in eligible high school seniors to participate, like go to college. Schools like Mount Ida, you know, the ones that can't, the small schools that can't handle it, are already folding up. And there'll be less colleges available for the future. But they're doing an aggressive enrollment program. They're going overseas. They're trying to bring everyone they can in to fill their quota of 1,800 per year that they need to get. And it's just a question of whether or not they can get enough kids in to do it. So, no different than the town, no different than the colleges experiencing the same problems. So, but the information out there is, again, not very clear. And I've got the reports here, and I believe some of you have received some of the same reports that I have. And it's just a question of whether or not we want to do it. We cannot move ahead and look at a community building or a new town hall until we can determine whether or not these existing school buildings are necessary. And people are going to continue to bark at us. And the other thing we don't want to do is spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in engineering work and design work for the next 2, 3, 4 years. And then in the fifth year, find out, whoops, wait a minute, we have a school we don't need anymore. You guys interested? Now we spend all this money for nonsense. So from the get-go, we have to find out whether or not the space needs that are required and necessary are being utilized. If that's the case, then we can put this one to bed and move on to the next project. And that's basically what it's all about. That's my proposal.
Bob, where'd you come up with 45,000?
Good question. I reached out to a number of agencies to try to get some help in determining that amount. I took it from, I took it from the town of, I think it was Hanson, who had done something like this. It was the only one I could find online, and he utilized the $45,000. I reached out to the Edward J. Collins Center at UMass. Was told maybe they could help me. I got no response after 2 phone calls. I reached out to the Strategic Performance Group, which was out of Pennsylvania, trying to get there to help get some information from them. No response. 1 or 2 reasons. Maybe they want to bid on the job. I don't know. But I couldn't get an actual number. But the $45,000 is out there. If it's less, great. If it's more, we'd have to come back and ask for more. So the RFQ would determine whether or not we're going to have enough money to do that or not. So but the $45,000 was based on something that the town of Hanson had tried to do prior in the previous year.
And was Hanson successful in doing it?
No, Hanson's request wasn't written as nicely as mine. It was actually thrown out because it was the way it was written was it didn't involve town agencies, and it had a lot of issues. So they have a representative town meeting. I believe it was after their finance committee that they pretty much said, no, you can't go forward with it, and they never did. So I'm not aware of any town that's done it actually.
So then that brings me to the next question. Who does it? Because first we have a price tag and we're kind of wishy-washy on that. Now, what type of agency does the study that you're looking for?
Well, there are studies out there. This one, the Strategic Performance Group, they do this kind of study. I'm sure there are others also. I'm not sure about the Edward J. Collins Institute. They probably would do it also. They'd have to bid on it. But again, this is a bidding process. So if we put it out there and it comes back at $30,000, well, good for us. It comes back at $50,000, it can't happen because the funding's not in place. So we'd have to come back and I would have to, or someone would have to come back and ask for more money. So it's one way or the other. The money's there, that's the total amount that would be allocated for the project, and that's what we go by.
Dr. Byetta has given us some numbers over the years.
Yep.
Why not use his numbers or his source of numbers for this information?
Well, I think people like myself want an objective outside agency to take a look at these numbers. And it makes obvious sense. If I'm going to try to sell something to you, I'm going to give you whatever information I think is necessary. I will tell you that the reports that I've looked at that were generated by the schools One in particular was the Educational Program Committee, made up of, I believe, teachers and parents. Their numbers are nowhere different than the Department of Education numbers. The birth rates are different than the town clerk's birth rates. So there's information out there that someone's giving it to them and they're utilizing it. But there's no way to really figure it out unless you get in there and figure out exactly what the numbers are. And they're all over the place.
Understood, but what I'm also hearing is that they're matching, at least in direction. You know, everybody's predicting a decrease in population. So it seems to me, you know, we're not looking at reports going the wrong ways that we need to choose from. We're just trying to choose from the magnitude of the decrease. Is that true, or is there more to it?
No, the numbers show otherwise. And, you know, I'll give you an example. The New England School Development Council, which is one of the reports I use, shows in 2018-2019, the total class sizes in Norton would be 2,336 students. Department of Education is higher, 2,438 students. So there's a difference right there. Then in 17-18, New England School Development said 2,473, and Department of Education said 2,273. So again, I'm not sure where everyone's getting the numbers, but there's got to be a logical way to find out the actual, break it down to the actual numbers and figure out how it's going to work. I know we've done research before, but it's been done internally. I'm asking for this to be done externally so we can get some accurate numbers, not based on any particular group or you know, any reason for it. And objectively, I think they're going to come back and tell us that we need the schools. I don't know that maybe that's going to happen, but none of us can tell you that. We can go down, we can sit down, we can scratch these numbers together, and after we do it as a group, who's going to believe us? I'm looking for someone from the outside that can come in and give us some information that has no hand in what's happening in Norton or perhaps any other community, if they decide to do so.
Do we have a sense of, or have you talked to Dr. Baeta and found out, because he must have a sense of how many kids he thinks fit in this school. So do we have a sense of what he thinks that number would need to decrease to?
Yeah, I have not done that. I can tell you the maximums have been held in the schools and what's there now. In the case of the Henry A. Yale, we've had as many as 559 students. We've got 395 supposedly there now. The JCS, 747, we have 462 there now. And the LGN was 492, which show 285 in that building. So the numbers are out there. That's a decrease, by the way, of 656 students just in that time period. And I'm not sure what the time period is, but I don't know when the highest enrollment was. I'm going to guess probably in the early 2000s, mid-2000s. That's probably when that happened.
Good, thanks.
Well, other than the cost, so the 45,000 is based on, I guess, a loose estimate from Hanson. Do we even know what their scope of their assessment was?
No,
what
very
they're looking
vague.
for? Okay.
And I mean, I probably, to be honest with you, yeah, I probably added a couple of things to it that they were not going to look at, you know, in my proposal. But honestly, based on my past experience with different projects we've done around town, I felt comfortable with the 45,000 based on what's happened in the past.
So this is how would a process like this work, Mike? Say this gets approved, is there a steering committee that somebody reports to and drives the scope of this?
Well, no,
request?
if I can answer that for you, it's in the article. It would, would be under the direction of the town manager and the superintendent of schools. So it would come back to them.
And they would collaborate, so any
Yeah.
scope creep, they would identify first.
Right. Yeah, they would come back to those two now. At that point, if they wanted to form a committee or whatever, they could do that. But, you know, that was my recommendation.
And how about some of these firms that do this kind of work? do they give estimates? I know you said you couldn't contact anybody.
I'm guessing they don't give estimates, they don't want to bid on the job. They can't, if I ask for how much you think it's gonna cost, and then they want to bid on the job, they say, well, we can't tell them now, we get made a suggestion, so unless Mike says some other information, that's the only way I could figure it out, was that, you know, they weren't bidding because they probably wanted to bid on it.
And just, I know you had some discrepancies there, but if we were to reach out to the school committee or Dr. Byetta and ask about those discrepancies, could they identify possibly what they are
Yeah.
before we move forward on something?
Yeah,
like
you
this?
could do that. I mean, I've got, like I said, I used New England School Development Council was one of them. The Education Program Plan Committee, which was the one that I believe you have a copy of, but that only addressed the from K to 5. That was limited just to K to 5. It didn't go beyond the 5th grade. And then you got the information from the Department of Education that you can look at also.
Okay, thank you.
I actually served on the education program plan. Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize. And more beautiful. I served on the education program plan committee as well as Carolyn did, who's from the school committee. And we did evaluate several different options and look at the exact enrollment at the schools and projected what the enrollment would be. And we spent 3 months doing it with weekly, bi-weekly meetings. So this was February and March of 2017, 2.5 years ago. So I felt confident at the time. It was very exhaustively evaluated and we didn't spend a dime, which I also felt really good about. You know, I have the report here. You may have it as well.
I have it.
But like I said, I felt really good about the way it was evaluated. We actually also got the numbers from Dr. Bayetta last week. I have them here, and they trend the way that you're describing, but they are the exact numbers, so we'd be able to compare them right against each other.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman, I believe you did the best job you could have based on the information you were given, so I don't challenge that. What I do challenge is, first of all, I went with the 5th grade. There wasn't really any information in this report beyond the 5th grade that would help us.
I believe that had to do with the buildings that were under consideration
right,
for
right. No, I
putting
get
the
that.
students to
Yeah.
use part of the Yale School.
Yeah, and I get that, but it was only at the elementary level. It had nothing to do with the middle or the high school, and taking into consideration any of the spaces that they may have in those buildings at the same time. On page 3 of that, the one thing that jumped right out at me was you're showing at the Hay, you're showing 236 in a partial building, and underneath it says, available to town of Norton, space available to the town of Norton. Then you go over and you look at the Hay, in JCS I think it is. I'm not sure which one it is, to be honest with you. Again, it says 265 capacity, partial building available to the town of Norton. So even in your report, it indicates that you have space.
Well, that was under one option. So that was option 2, if one of the schools housed pre-K and K, and then 2 of the schools were grades 1 through 5. So it was indicating that that building would be used just for pre-K to K, and then the rest of the building could be used for town purposes. So that's what that is talking about. There's the 3 options are sort of listed side by side so that the numbers can be compared. And I do believe that also on the district website, the superintendent provides the
It's actually-
Gov.
Can I just interrupt for a minute? It's not the superintendent who provides it. It's,
you know, the conversation tonight is about getting a sort of non-biased look. That is, ClearGov does do that, and it's called the Transparency Center. It's been on the school website for a couple of years now. All the information that is being sort of discussed is there. If you want to peruse that site, it is totally unbiased. It's not done by the school, and it basically, or by Norton Public Schools, and it's basically a comparison of Norton against other towns. And I think that what you'll find is that, you know, we sort of typically spend less and have a larger student-teacher ratio than other towns. But all of the information is right there. So if you go onto the school website, you'll see it. There's a link that says Transparency Center, and that is actually a very non-biased look at sort of what is being discussed.
And the only thing I would say, Mr. Chairman, to that would be that, again, this is an agency that has, their whole purpose is school education. And I want to stress again, I'm not talking about getting rid of teachers. I'm not talking about getting rid of staff. I'm not talking about any of that stuff. What I'm trying to figure out is whether or not we need the 5 buildings, and whether or not, based on the future enrollments, we're going to continue to need those buildings. If you guys can give us some information that's solid enough that people will take it for gospel and agree that that's the way it is, that I can hold in my hand, and I can go out to the citizens of Norton and say, yes, they need the school, here's the information. If you can give me that, well, to the point where I can convince them that we can abandon the idea of looking at school facilities and look at moving ahead and possibly building a community center and a new town hall in the near future. It's not going to happen right away. If you can give us that information, then I'll withdraw the article. But I'm not confident I can get the information I need based on what I'm looking at so far. There may be other agencies I'm not aware of that can give us that. And a very impartial response is what I'm looking for. Tom?
Yeah, you did that study. What's the capacity of the LG North? I know it's gotta be greater than 600. I mean, it's a fairly large sized building.
The LG is the smallest of the 3.
Right.
Yeah, but even at that, it's a pretty big building.
I'm not sure if it's in here.
I don't think it's not in there,
The reason I ask that is if you have a building that's got a capacity, let's say 500, and you only have 200 students in there, somewhere along the way you should be looking at it and saying, that building just up turning the lights on is costing me X amount of money. Forget about who's in the building or how many is in the building. That within a structure of 5 schools, we should be able to maybe move those 200 people someplace else. Maybe it's impossible to do. I don't know the system that well. But that's the things I'd be looking at. You have a capacity of X and you're at Y, and Y is significantly different than X, then you should be saying, well, gee, maybe I could save some money if I close that school. I'm not laying anybody off. I'm just going to move them someplace else. You got 5 buildings. I'm sure that not all 5 are at capacity. That's a guarantee. But you may not be able to move X to Y because of the grade structure. But that's the thing about this that makes sense. Forgetting about the student population declining, I'm more concerned about the population we have now and the buildings are not being fully utilized. And maybe a look says, well, maybe we can get rid of a school. I don't know. But I haven't seen that approach yet. Every time we mention, gee, we ought to cut back on the schools, everybody starts committing carry. You know, there should be a sense of, yeah, maybe there is some way to do something different. And I think you looked at it, your group looked at it.
Exactly.
And maybe there is a way that we can combine things. Maybe not. I mean, I don't want to sit in Joe's seat. He knows more about it than I do, obviously. But that's the only question I bring up about the study. If we know that we've got 200 students at LG North, and it usually has 500 students, then maybe we can do something with those 200 students if it matches the grades. That's my only question to the whole thing, is that a good look at what our schools are utilized, much utilization is in the schools, I think is significant. It has nothing to do with anything other than, are they being underutilized? That would be my only point to the whole deal. If that's what it takes to do it, I don't know. Maybe somebody can tell me that, yeah, this is the reason why we can't LG North out of the picture, because of the grade structure. We can't fit them all in a middle school, we can't fit them all in Saumonese, and Yale now, who knows what we're gonna do with Yale, with the asbestos problem. So I mean, now, you know, it's just a question I bring up, but.
Well, I believe that's part of what, if I may, Mr. Chairman, I believe that is part of what we evaluated.
Yeah.
I will say that at the time, the question that was posed to the committee was whether or not there could be space made at the Yale School. So that was the specific
That's
goal
it.
of the study, was to consider part of the building at the Yale to be used for a town purpose.
Right.
And then there was also the part of what came out of the study was learning that if part of the building was ever used for another purpose besides school purposes, then the building itself would no longer be eligible. Even if it went back to being 100% a school building again, it would no longer be eligible for MSBA. I always get that one wrong. MSBA funding any further. So, you know, sometimes you get 56% or 60% of dollar.
But I'm
So-
more concerned about the LG North.
Right,
When I heard a
and
number of 200, that concerns me.
that is something that,
You know.
at the time, Dr. Bayetta said, if we were even talking about the school, that might even be a consideration.
That would be.
But that would be his consideration, not the Yale school based on
And we've closed that once before,
spaces.
for about a month. And then we reopened it again. But when they, in the whole scope of things, that was the one that they figured was the easiest to close and not impact the education system,
Right.
okay? But that's what I would like to see people look at, just numbers. Numbers don't make sense. 200 and a 500 capacity building doesn't make sense to me. Just to light it and heat it and cool it and whatever, and clean it. And we just spent, I don't know how many $1,000 hooking them into the sewer system. So the building is now a usable building. Prior to that, the sewage being dumped all over the place. Plus, it's gonna have its own electric source. That makes it even more usable. So, that's only my opinion, and I think you guys did a good job.
I actually have a question for Dinah. I see her in the back row there. I'm wondering if this is something that the building committee has discussed in addition to you, Bob. Like, I understand where you're coming from. I have mixed feelings about the idea in general, but if part of the purpose behind this is for us to repurpose that building as something else, is that something that the building committee has given consideration to?
Excuse me, we did look at the Yale School on our last pass, and we were told that it wasn't available because it was going to be needed for education. So it was something that the building committee, as I said, looked at in the last pass, but it's not something that we're considering at the moment.
It seems everybody is agreeing that enrollments are going down, and it seems that there's going to be space available in the schools, partial, building available. But is there been any determination of the actual square footage of how much free space we would have? Because without knowing the actual the square footage, we wouldn't know if we could even use it or not. So would that be the type of thing that would be provided? Because we've heard partial use of the building, maybe for the town use or whatever, but that's pretty vague. If we had a square footage to see what was actually usable, then that might have better use of that space rather than just leaving it empty.
My understanding, Mike, is Dr. Bayetta went on BZ Radio when the asbestos issue came up and had to remove 192 students from that section. I believe it's just that one section of the building. Obviously, the classrooms in the back weren't affected by it. So you've got the front of that building right now is about 192 students, based on what I heard, which raises the question again. I'm also told that the third floor is empty. So in order for us, for the building committee to continue to solicit support, we need to know if we have something existing that we can utilize again. And if that doesn't happen, then we need to move on. And I want to accept one more thing before I forget about it. This is not about finances. I believe that if there's any savings that the school committee and the town can save on that use, removing one building, that money should be put into the budget anyway and utilized for other programs that are being cut back and for whatever reason. You're still going to need teachers, you're going to still need supplies, classrooms, and all that stuff. It's just a question of whether or not we need to have 3 to 5 buildings that are being underutilized. And to everyone else's point, if we're spending money to keep them open, and we don't have to be, that money could be utilized for something else within the school system.
I just want to clarify a couple of things. Number one, I know that the third floor is not empty in that building because my son's classroom is on the third floor of that building. Number two, you're implying that 192 students have been relocated with no upheaval to anyone, which is completely untrue.
I never said that.
Well, you're implying that they're in
No, I didn't
regular
imply that.
sized classrooms having regular days, just like they
No,
would
I
if they
didn't.
were in their appropriate space, which is not accurate.
That's-
They're,
I would agree
my
with that.
son's class is meeting in the business manager's office.
I agree with that.
And they are smushed, and they are doing a fabulous job, but they are very tight on space.
I'm not
The
questioning
music
that.
classes are being held on the stage in the gymnasium, where half the gymnasium is classrooms. So you can imagine that that's not the most conducive atmosphere to education for any of those students. So to imply that we can just take that building and do something with it without any kind of impact to educating kids is not accurate.
Okay, and that's your words. All of those are your words. I never once suggested that. What I'm suggesting to you is, if we agree, if we can agree as a town, that we have an extra building along the way, it's gonna take 2, 3, 4 years to do it anyway. It's not gonna happen overnight. If we tried to build a building today in this town, if we got permission today to put up a town hall or a community building, you're talking 2 to 3 years out. My suggestion here is not, doesn't have to happen next year. I'm looking at, again, I mentioned this earlier, we don't want to be sitting here 5 years from now saying, you know what, we got 102 kids in the OGM, you know, maybe it's time we do something about that. After we've already gone through the process of trying to build 2 additional new buildings in town. And another comment that was made, population is going to continue to drop into the year 2030. That's already been confirmed. We all know that. You've got these antiquated buildings, LG and Yale, that are 2 of the original school buildings in this town, in this community. If in the year 2030, I probably won't be here, but if I am, in the year 2030, if it happens that we need to have a new school, then we build a new school. That's what you do. You build a modern facility. The ones that you guys are band-aiding, we are band-aiding together, are antiquated. They're old schools. And it would be an opportunity, easier opportunity to say, you know what, gee, suddenly our kids started having kids like you wouldn't believe, and we've got families of 8 again, and that's all happening. Then you go out and you start talking about building new schools. Right now, we're talking about a slump in population to at least the year 2030. And I think it's a logical reason to look at. It's not about finances, it's not about displacement of students, not about getting rid of anybody. It's talking about, can we repurpose a building in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years without having an impact on anything? And that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a straight answer. And I'm not confident I can get it from anyone even in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I would love this company from Pennsylvania to come up here and do the job. They probably won't. But I'm looking for information so that we're not back here with egg on our face 5 years from now saying, gee, you know what, we should have used that building in the first place.
So, what is your projection, for lack of better terminology, or what's your time frame for this study?
So
6 months,
March of
a year?
2020. The end of March, 2020.
So
It's in the
6
article.
months,
Yeah.
that they'll be able to jump in, get the
I
information.
sure hope so. This isn't a lot of information, but they should be able to figure it out. If that's what they do, it shouldn't be a big deal. Giving them 6 months. Actually, it'd be less than that, but you have to do an RFQ, and you have to choose them, so you're probably getting down to, 3 or 4 months.
Or is that, I know a lot of companies that do this type of work, and sometimes that's not a 3-month process.
Then you don't bid on the job. On the other hand, if you felt it was restrictive, March 2020 was restrictive, I have no objection to moving it out. If you want to make it April, May, June, August, whenever you want to do it. I mean, that's something that could be considered. I think the timetable's too short.
But then doesn't that impact some of the other things that the building committee's doing and whatnot? So,
That's why I was trying to get it done sooner than later.
Paul,
Do we know how many empty classrooms exist right now in the elementary schools?
I have no
Empty
idea.
space?
I think, are you looking at me?
Well, I guess whoever might know the information.
I think what is, I don't think any at JCS. I can't really speak to the other schools. I know JCS is pretty busy. But I think what we're forgetting is that over the past few years, Dr. Bayetta has worked really diligently to keep children in Norton. which means that instead of putting children who are severely needy, putting them on a bus and sending them somewhere, that we have worked really hard to make sure our staff is diligently trained to educate those children in Norton. So there may be classrooms that have smaller amounts of children in them because of the need of the population. But that is very different than what happened years ago when children would leave Norton and be educated outside of Norton. So I know there are some specialized classrooms in the district that exist today that didn't exist years ago. So I'm sure that Dr. Bayetta would have that information for you.
I mean, when he said the capacity of the LGN is 500, but there's 200 students there, give or take right now.
Yeah,
That
I
makes
don't
me
know.
think, is that 500 like fire code, like 500 people can fit in the building, like for an event? Or 500, seated classroom students?
I'm sure, I don't know, Bonnie, is that information in the report?
I don't believe so. But we were just talking about also that the READS program, which brings income into the is school now
district.
housed in the schools.
is in the schools and uses some of the space in the schools, the classrooms in the schools. And so, the question would be whether or not the loss of that income would offset, not having, what impact it would have to not have that income in the schools, but they're not counted in the numbers.
And I'll just comment on that you also have to take into account that if you don't have the income and that frees up space that you can consolidate, then you have to take away the extra expense of carrying a school you don't need any longer to make it apples to apples. So if we back out those other agencies, the schools have to back out the expense because they won't have that building if the study says, yes, you can get rid of the building. So you do have to remember that. Mike?
I'm concerned about, once we get this information, is going to be acted upon, because the schools would decide if a building should close or not. And if they don't see those results as valid, then it won't get acted upon, and there's 45,000, just thrown away. So, I don't know if it's even possible. It would be a way to find out if there was would be acceptance by the school department, the school committee on those numbers, because they could say, we feel these numbers are better than those, and that's where it comes down to, is who do you want to believe?
And Mr. Chairman, I'm looking for information that I can pass on to constituents in town, telling them, people live in town, telling them that this is the information. If the 5 schools are being utilized, I don't care. We can move on. But in the meantime, we're going to continue to spend money on engineering work. Okay, we got this spot over here. Let's do an engineering work. Let's do a conceptual on that. Oh, that's not going to work. Let's try this one. And while we're doing all this, we're not getting the support we need to move on and try to come up with a project that makes sense. To answer your question, I'm not saying these are by code, because I know in some cases, at one time, the middle school, the new middle school, was way over capacity. I mean, it was in the ozone layer. The only thing I can tell you, the Hay at one time, its highest enrollment was 559, they have 395. The JCS 747, they have 462. And the LGN, it was at 492, and right now it's 285. So I'm going to guess that they're probably on the high side, but I don't know that for sure. I would think it would be over capacity.
I'm looking at this study that was done by the New England School Development Council, and their projection for the current school year is 2153, which is a number somewhat significantly lower than what Dr. Bayetta told us last week. But their projected number for the 2028-2029 school year is 2115. So while that's a decline in enrollment, it's a decline in enrollment of 38 students across 13 grade levels. So I guess my question is, do we want to throw 45 grand at figuring out where 38 students are going to go in the next 10 years?
One question to that is, if I was Dr. Bayetta, and I'm not, I would say, gee, maybe I do have too many schools. Maybe I need to have some professionals look at it, whether they be outside, inside, come down from the atmosphere. I would think I'd want that to be done, especially when you look at the numbers, because you're always looking for money. We, not you, we're always looking for money, for something. Now, what would be more advantageous than if you could, in fact, work it out and eliminate a school? Forget about who you give it to, but just eliminating a school has got to be a significant cost, okay? I'm just talking about utilities, forgetting about the people that occupy it. Utilities alone have got to be significant for Norse, okay? Easily for LG Norse, because it's a standalone building, all right? That's just my point, and I haven't heard anybody tell me, yeah, we can't use it because we have so many classrooms filled. I haven't heard that from anybody. I haven't heard it from Dr. Bietta either. Because I had asked the question, what schools can't we utilize? And I never got feedback that says, well, I need LG Norse because of this. And he's probably got a valid point. I need it because we can't mix the grades. But when you tell me you got 300 less students in than the building capacity is, I get a little concerned. Just my simpleness.
Well, I don't disagree at all, but I think we should give Dr. Bietta the opportunity to tell us
I would
and
love,
give us that information
I would love that
versus
to happen.
spending the hard-earned tax dollars of the people who live in this town when we have people
other
that
thing.
might be able to give us that information.
Anybody who's been on this committee with me long enough knows that I cannot stand studies. We have studied this town for millions and millions of dollars over the years I've been on this committee, okay? And if this study, for some reason, like Mike said, the school committee says, hey, I don't care, we're autonomous. I don't care what the study says, I don't think they would, but if they did, they could do it, okay? But we have studied this town to death. At some point, we gotta be done studying. That doesn't mean I disagree with this, but it means if it's not gonna be utilized, just doing basic mathematics would mean Dr. Bietta could come up with the numbers and say, maybe there is a problem there. And I'm sure he's looked at it. But if he can come back and give us an answer, I don't think anybody'd object to that.
No,
I'd just like to know if he says, yeah, I need Norse because, and, you know, I'm open-minded. I might be old, but I understand.
Mr. Chairman, I'm with him too. I'm open-minded. I'm old too. And I'm open-minded, but if we can get an objective numbers put together with projections that are objective and come back to this committee, this finance committee, with information that says we have 5 buildings, this is the reason why we need the 5 buildings. I'm not suggesting we spend $45,000. I'm with him. I don't want to spend any money either. I really don't. But we've got to get an answer from somebody. And sometimes you have to go outside to get it. And that's all I'm suggesting here. If Dr. Bietta comes back with a complete report by school, basically outlining what I'm suggesting here, and gives it to you guys, and it all makes sense to you, I want you to shoot this thing down. And I'm not going to move it on the town meeting floor. But we've got to start a dialogue here somehow to get everyone that's in a position to do so talking about this objectively. I know I hear the word transparent a lot. That too. Throw that out there. And let's make sure we understand exactly what the projections are going to be. If in fact these 5 schools are utilized, I know you have school choice. You know, there's other programs that are in these schools that I don't even think the Department of Education counts. I'm not sure. You got the special ed issues. You got special early or whatever it is.
The Little Lancers program,
Yeah.
and that's a big moneymaker for the
There's-
school district too as well.
Well, when you say moneymaker, okay, great. But are we keeping a building open? I think someone said this already. Just so we can rent out the space for a few bucks when you could make 3 times as much if you didn't have the
The
building
state
at all.
requires us to have that program.
It's
We
not
then,
rented, it's tuition.
It could be somewhere else,
Yeah.
is what I'm saying, if you don't need it. But, you know, I'll leave it at that. I mean, I don't know, I'm looking for information, maybe you guys can get it. If that's the case, I won't move, I would ask you not to move my petition, and I won't do it at town meeting floor.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that I think the dialogue could be had between you, if you would like to pursue it, or anyone, to ask Dr. Bietta for these numbers and for it to be fully transparent, all the things that you're looking for. So that's what I'm struggling to understand. It's like, you know, we can allot for the space in all the schools, we can determine how many students are there, and I think we can project as much as we can project. I mean, we talk a lot about wanting projections in this room, and those aren't able to be provided in terms of the financial side a lot of the time. So it's difficult to project, but I think that we can get the things that we're looking to get to be able to answer these questions without spending the $45,000, and that is just my.
My suggestion would be the finance committee, the school board, and the board of selectmen all sit down and discuss the numbers and figure out whether or not it makes sense or not to continue with the 5 buildings. If you can all agree to that, I'm all for it too. But that gives us, gives the building committee the latitude they need to walk up to people and say, you know what, we did a survey, we don't have it, now we can move on. Now we can ask them for money for engineering work and necessary plans that they need on viable projects, on viable land that they think they can work with. And we can move ahead. But we're not going to move ahead until we know that we don't need one of these school buildings. It's just not going to happen. It's going to keep coming back and biting us. And we need to stop that biting us. So it's the only way to do it.
Dr. Byetta, I think, obviously sees anticipates in having a need for the school for his conversation with Dinah and the permanent building committee. So, I'd like to hear that reasoning.
He's in China, so I'm sure he'd be here.
Well, if anyone knows the incantation to summon Dr. Byetta. He'll be back at some point, he has, sounds like he's already kind of stated his position. If we want to hear the reasoning, we should hear the reasoning, but I'd like to at least hear the reasoning before we just go spend money on numbers that might not tell us the whole story.
And in all,
Statistics, statistics can be read a
you know
lot of
what,
different ways.
I'm willing to back
Yeah.
off. If you guys are willing to get in there and find out what the numbers are, we can just back off from this. I don't have to worry about the next town meeting and get this information. I would say to you, though, this petition's been out there for a while. People have been aware of it for a while. I'm actually surprised that somebody can come to you guys and say, hey, Kimball's smoking something funny. Here it is. Here's the information on the 5 buildings.
I didn't get it started.
Oh, I'm sorry. I haven't tried it yet, but give me time. Point of the matter is that I just want answers. And I'm not the only one. There were people in this community that I walked up to. I had a yard sale a couple of weeks ago up the street. I must have had the conversation with 5 or 6 people. Why are we not using one of the schools? And I'd love to say, because they need them. That's all. That's all I'm looking for. And we can move ahead.
I was just gonna say that maybe the finance committee could request from the schools that when they prepare their budget this coming year, that they prepare school-based budgets to submit to you. So you know how many people, teachers are in a school, how many administrators are in a school, what the utilities are for that particular school, what rents they're pulling in from other sources in that particular school, and how many students are in those schools, and then you'd get some of the information maybe you're looking for.
Sure they have it.
I mean, the principals must give that information to the superintendent, but I don't think it comes to you.
No, I think that's a good idea. I have no problem with that.
I'm sorry, can I just add to that? Because I think that is a good idea, and I think it would be also a good idea if we had that from the other buildings in town as well, so that we understand capacity, operating costs, as well as any sort of vacant space, library, and the others.
I don't think we can rent the town hall.
I don't think anybody.
I don't think anybody wants it, so. Okay, thanks, folks. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike?
We have some information tonight from the planning board. Unfortunately, Paul can't be here. His mother passed away today. And I'm not sure he'll be available Wednesday either, so I'll try and see if someone else from the planning board can come Wednesday. Otherwise, it would have to wait until your last meeting on the 16th when Paul could be there.
Okay.
But I'll just go over the information with you, and so you have it. And if we can go down to Article 22 first. This was a petition article by David Cohen, who's here tonight. And the planning board voted.
22 is
But-
Kimball's. I'm 24.
The planning board voted 5-2 against this article, and this was an article to allow gasoline stations and including underground storage of liquid petroleum within Zone 3, provided that the special permit granting authority finds the tanks and piping associated with the use have reasonable and appropriate safeguards and infrastructure which meet the Massachusetts Department of Protection underground storage tank operational standards and minimize contamination and address impacts to ground or surface water. And the planning board did hear this, and there was a presentation, and they voted 5-2 against this petition.
Can I present? Yeah. All right. Hello, folks. My name's David Cohen. I've lived in Norton for 11 years. I've got 2 kids in the Norton schools, one in sophomore in high school. One is a 7th grader at the middle school. We've been here 11 years, live over on Fuller Drive. Around 2015, we had been here for 7-8 years, and we tend to find ourselves traveling out of town to get just basic resources, whether it's gas, ice cream, something to eat. So Bank of America, the old Bank of America next to the next to the Yale School, came up for sale. So in 2015, we purchased that. And our thought was to develop it and develop it with a mixed-use retail component where it has an ice cream shop and a sub shop and a drive-through for a coffee shop or a Panera Bread or something like that. So we went through. I had plans designed. I presented in June of 2015 to the planning board. At the time, it was a 13,000 square foot single-story building, and it had all of the colonial gables and matched, I would say, the Walgreens facade more so than the CVS. So we got into the meetings and deliberations and traffic studies and went through the whole process. So finally, in January of 2017, I was granted, so I went in for a couple variances, and one of the variants was for a drive-through. The drive-through was a special permit. So I requested a special permit for the drive-through, which the planning board granted me. However, I couldn't have a microphone for the drive-through unless it was a bank use. So if a Panera Bread, who showed interest, wanted to build a store there, they'd have to pull up to a reader board, pull up to a face-to-face with a human, give them the order, pull up or place the order, pull up to another window, pay, and get your order. So it just doesn't meet Panera's business model. You have your speaker, you pick up your food, you pay for your food, you pick up your food. So the same with Starbucks, same with Dunkin' Donuts. So what they did allow was, okay, we'll give you a drive-through with no restrictions as long as it was the same as the prior use, which was a bank. Well, a bank just left, so I don't think a bank is gonna be jumping back in to occupy the space. So, spent a lot of money with professional engineers and architects and third-party consultants and carry costs and da-da-da. So unfortunately, I had high hopes. I thought, our intentions were, we're here long-term. Let's get the house, let's get the kids settled, let's buy some real estate, develop it on our own, so we're doing something in the community, just like you folks are with your volunteering, etc. So I was approached in 2018 by Cumberland Farms. Cumberland Farms, I don't know if you've seen it. What I'd like to do is you can just take one of these and pass them around. Just gonna take one. Thank you. So Cumberland Farms has totally rebranded themselves. And when I mean rebranding, they've focused, they're known for gas. You're gonna go in there and get gas. But now they're focusing on fast food where you prepare it yourself. So it's coffee, it's sandwiches, it's salads, with all the condiments. So it's not the magnitude of a Subway or a D'Angelo's or something like that. It's a stripped-down version of a Dunkin' Donuts, a sub shop, and a convenience store. So we signed a ground lease with Cumberland, and when I show you in the package, they're going to build a beautiful colonial-style building, which they have. The closest one here is on 123 in Attleboro. There's another one to look at in Sharon on 95. Get off at exit 10, 7 or 10. And in Brockton at Route 24, they just built another one. Beautiful looking building, fits the profile, what we want downtown. So I ran into a zoning issue. Not a zoning issue, a bylaw issue. So the way the bylaw was written, or is currently written, is gas stations are allowed. However, they're allowed with above ground tanks. So above ground tanks, now you have to have 110% containment of whatever the capacity of the tanks. Then you have to have security around the tanks, and it's not cost effective. It's a total deal breaker. So the reason we're in that position is the town of Norton has, back up a bit. The state of Massachusetts delineates town watersheds into two zones. Zone 1 being a body of water, let's say Norton Reservoir, that's our town water. Within a 400-foot radius of that Norton Reservoir, you can't have any gas stations. And it goes beyond gas stations. It's sodium chloride to treat the roads, manure from farms. In my case, it's gasoline. So that section of town is our wells that we are currently pumping from are south on 140 towards, I want to say, not Leonard Street. You're coming down 140 near the Norton-Taunton line, and it's shifted off to the east. Is the one of the main wells where we're pulling out of. And I think there's another one just adjacent to it that they're cleaning and bringing up to speed. So my parcel of land sits in Zone 3. Zone 3, the gas station's allowed, but the gas station's allowed, but you have to have above ground tanks. However, the state DEP doesn't recognize a Zone 3. They only recognize Zone 1 and Zone 2. So the state DEP says, all right, we're going to leave it up to the towns. They can differentiate where they want their Zone 3s. So this was created back in 1996, this delineation line. And the delineation line I'll show you when we get into the presentations. And the way it's delineated is just the history of Zone 3. Basically, Zone 3, the way the town defines Zone 3 is if gasoline spills in a Zone 3, that it has the chance to eventually permeate to a Zone 2 or a Zone 1. Okay. But that is from somebody dropping 1,000 747s filled with gasoline and pouring them on the streets of Norton. A gas station with 2 underground double-walled fiberglass tanks aren't going to do that. So we had Cumberland Farms independent engineers put on a presentation about tanks that were assembled back in 1996, the early 1990s. And those tanks are sitting, where Mass Gas is on 140. So Mass Gas, somehow, they are in a Zone 3. They were granted a permit to have underground tanks. I don't know how, I tried to look, but anyway, that's not my point. So from 1996 to current, the DEP, the Massachusetts DEP, has put together about 5 or 6 standards for not only the installers of the underground tanks, but the end user of the tanks. And it's a 6-step process where after every step, it's monitored and approved or corrected with a corrective action report by the DEP. So the DEP says, well, your pea stone is a little too large, dig it out, you got to put in what's specified. So the equipment that is used underground today has a fail rate much less, significantly less, than the old metal tanks that are 1, corrosive, and 2, are very brittle. So the tanks we use today are double-walled. And as being double-walled, they have an outside chamber as a catch mechanism. Think of it as a pool if the inner tank were to leak. Once that inner tank leaks, it colors a solution on the between the inner tank and outer tank, and it shoots up like a 4-inch pipe that's in the manager's office that they inspect daily, and it should be clear at all times. If it comes up black, blue, green, whatever dye they put in that second layer, then you know you've got a leak. And it's contained, they try to identify exactly where it is. It notifies the fire department, it notifies DEP. So there's a whole process. I'm not the expert on alarm systems and safety mechanisms. I'm just trying to capture it all together to get your support for underground storage tanks. But I need to stress, by you supporting it doesn't now allow me to put in underground tanks. I still have to apply with the planning board for a special permit. So this just modifies the bylaw that says gasoline stations allowed in a Zone 3 watershed as long as they meet Mass DEP X, Y, and Z. There's 5 standards they have to meet. So right now, Norton is the only town in our area that doesn't allow underground storage tanks in Zone 3s. So in the past, I've been working on this deal for about 17 months. They've built one in Sharon, they've built one in North Attleboro, they've built 2 in the city of Brockton, all in Zone 3 watersheds. No leakage. I mean, I think we all know we're tied to our phones and internet. You don't hear of underground fuel tanks leaking anymore. You hear of when they did leak, that and they went undetected. That's when you had the problems. But the technologies today, there are so many safeguards in place that I don't want to say it's impossible to get a leak, but if there is a leak, it's going to be contained and minimal spillage. So, which brought me to just some economics of what I have calculated. I've owned it since 2015. So if you go to my little chart here, so since 2015, the town has assessed the property around $218,000, a little more. And at $1,490 a thousand, I paid roughly $3,200 in real estate taxes annually. And I had no personal property. The lot was the building was raised, so it's just trees, a little pavement. I mean, you all live in town, so you know what it looks like. With a proposed Cumberland Farms, their new prototypes assess anywhere between 3 and as high as 375 million. I went conservative and stayed on the low end. So at a $3.13 million building, there's $46,000 in tax revenue right there. In addition, we'll get another roughly $6,000 in personal property. So all of their coolers, all of their cooking equipment, their coffee urns, is all leasehold improvements. When I spoke to the tax department, these were numbers validated by the tax department. I didn't make these up. And most importantly, it's minimal impact on town services and resources. So if I put apartments there, which, I don't want it because I live here, but I'm running out of opportunities, that's going to put stress on the schools. It's going to put stress on the fire department. It's going to put stress on the police department. So, of course, a convenience store, they're going to have, some kids, they're going to argue. I'm not going to say the cops will never be there, but I just think it'll be minimal impact on our fire and school resources and town resources altogether. Some other benefits to having them in town is employment. So based off the new prototype, and it's roughly 5,000 square foot store, they offer 15 full-time employees. A full-time employee is considered after 32 hours. 32 hours is considered full-time, full benefits. In addition, they offer 20 part-time employees. Part-time employees are not offered benefits. Town residents encouraged to apply. They push for that, but, you know, it's up to the applicants and who wants to push in, and, you know, what the workforce is out here currently. And then just some general other benefits. It's going to be a beautiful building. It's a colonial style with a lot of gable ends and hardy plank siding and wood windows. I mean, it's just a nice looking colonial building. It's going to fit in there beautifully. I hear all the time about the complaints, the trees, and I just put my hands up and say, I've tried. I live over off of Burt Street, so when I get gas, I go right to Easton, because I don't want to go left to Easton, because now I got to go over into Speedway. You go to Speedway on a Saturday, Speedway's jammed. So I can continue and go into Abington, into Attleboro, and the next gas station there is, another 3 miles from Speedway, which is another Cumberland Farms. So I take a right, and, you know, basically from the fire department, police department, that whole neighborhood there goes right and feeds Easton their gas revenue. So, you know, you go in there, you get your gas, your whatever, your milk, your drinks, your cigarettes, whatever it is. And it's going to be full service. I think it's going to be a great benefit for the Wheaton kids. They have an outdoor parlor. They got 3 or 4. It's a fenced-in patio with 3 or 4 tables, 5 or 6 seats at a table. I know, like I said, I have my kids in the school systems, and the teachers talking about the coffee for 99 cents and when's it coming and blah, 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 blah. So it definitely has, it has a lot to offer. It fills a void. It's not another, I guess I'll say coffee shop, standalone coffee shop. So what I also did is I gave you a site plan layout, this one here, which shows the building on the left. We have 2 entrances off of Mass Highway. We've secured our Mass Highway permits for those openings. And then we'll have 1, 2, 3 double dispensers, so there'll be a total of 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 12 fill stations at this site. The ingress and egress through the site has been recommended and reviewed by the planning board, as well as the planning board's independent engineer. And then if you go off to the last few pages, you can just see a couple elevations. The first one would be coming, heading westbound. So just say heading from Walgreens towards the high school. That's the elevation you would see. The second page is if you're coming from the middle school heading towards the center of town, that's the elevation you would see. And I gave you one more with the canopy, which will protect the 12 pumps. It has the fire system up above. There is one abutter. If you go back to this picture here, there is one abutter at the end of Seminary Way. And her house is basically behind this tree. It is, as where we are today, October, the foliage being full bloom, her house is not seen. She had some concerns with fencing. We met those concerns by giving her a taller fence. She had some concerns about plantings. We were going to put plantings on her side, spruce trees. She preferred to put the plantings back on our side. So we haven't kissed and shook hands yet, but I think we're in good shape. I feel good with what she asked and what we provided.
So, was the only objection to this plan due to the tanks, and everything else was okayed, or you didn't even get that far?
Well, let me tell you. So we had, it's an interesting story. So I'm the landowner. So I leased to Cumberland Farms. So Cumberland Farms, they have a team of attorneys, professionals, engineers, architects. Okay. So before they, the first thing they do is select a site. They select a site, and then they go right to the town zoning bylaws. And they have a permit engineer read through the bylaws and make sure that piece of land that they're looking at, there aren't any restrictions, that it can meet their filling station, convenience store needs, parking. So Cumberland's team had met with the town planner and some other officials. Town planner, water department, town planner, water department, conservation. Who else am I missing? Building inspector, fire, police. So they had an initial meeting, so they kind of penciled out the layout of the building, where the tanks are going to be, and there was a little talk about the bylaw and underground tanks, but at the time, somebody had said it's not an issue. It's at Mass Gas. Mass Gas is in the same zone. They have underground tanks, and they actually abut Norton Reservoir. And then we went to the next meeting, tied everything up, cleaned up the plan, did some other changes, said, okay, let's go to the planning board now. We go to the planning board, and we're 80% through. A planning board member said, well, the way I read the bylaw is no underground storage tanks. So Cumberland's attorney said, well, we had several meetings with town department heads, and we were outside of that. We weren't included in that zoning. Not an issue for us. Well, the way I read this, the way I read it, yeah, you are. So that kind of opened up Pandora's box.
Yep.
At the time, so Cumberland had spent probably $150,000 to $200,000 between test borings in the ground, all of their survey work, traffic studies. The planning board was very thorough. They had them do everything you could think of to get some satisfaction to the planning board. So now Cumberland's like, well, we're not putting above ground tanks because it's a deal breaker. Nobody does it.
Well, that was gonna be my question. Are there any above ground gasoline storage tanks anywhere in a 50 or 75 mile radius of here?
Don't see it. You would see it maybe Main Street, intersection of Main and Main in Boston, but you're not gonna see it in Plainville, Norton, Easton, Brockton. The demand just isn't there.
Because it adds how much to the cost?
That I don't know. Enough for it to kill a deal.
And is this a 24-hour Cumberland like the one near
That would
Xfinity?
be at the discretion of the planning board.
And you know off the top of your head, you know, you have 15 full-time, maybe 20 part-time.
Yep.
Is that other Cumberland Farms closing?
On 140?
Yeah.
No. Totally different trading area.
Okay. Close enough, but okay.
Yep.
Mike?
You said Mass Gas is Zone 3, they have an underground already,
Yes.
and you don't know how that happens?
I don't. I try to research it. So in 1996 is when the amendment came out. I looked on town records. 2004, Mass Gas was formed, but I don't know if Mass Gas bought it from
That gas
Tim's.
station's been there forever.
Yeah.
The underground tanks
Ever.
polluted my
So
my
there you go.
well.
No,
So they,
Reservoir.
yeah. So I'm sure he had.
they've been grandfathered in.
Yeah.
He had steel tanks, but I was also told the town or the state or EPA, he had to pull them and put in double walled.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So he is now conforming to current standards.
Right, but that was an existing business, I'm gonna say from the 40s, 50s.
At least as long as I've been in town, 50 years, it's been there.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
So he's been grandfathered in. That's
Which
probably
happens
how
all
he
the
happened.
time.
Yeah,
Which happens all the time.
yeah.
Bob?
Yeah, 1996, when ethanol filtered into your well, across Reservoir Street, we ended up having to put in water mains down Reservoir, abandon those artesian wells so that they could be utilized.
Yep.
And, your house is one of them.
Yep.
So that was the reason for it. Mass Gas was not found to be a polluter, I guess, at that time. We don't, you and I probably don't understand that to this day, but they were told they had to put in double line tanks. When we adopted that bylaw in '96, it was because we were all paranoid of that, number one, and the fact that we didn't want anything in the ground. We wanted to be able to see the tanks, know that there was a problem, if there was a leak, obviously you knew it was there. 25 years later, 24 years later, I'm sure technology's changed a lot. And I'm not talking on behalf of this project itself, but in Zone 3, which again, like you said, is a zone, extra zone, that of course Norton has to have extra zones and extra zoning regulations that most towns don't have. Point of the matter is that we were paranoid about the tanks, we wanted to have them above ground. Then comes 9/11. Think about it. Would you want gas tanks on top of the ground
No.
after 9/11? Can you insure those tanks on top of the ground? So the bylaw is archaic and it doesn't work anymore. And under special permit, he could, or they could, if they wanted to, build that gas station with above ground tanks today under a special permit. I think what they're asking for is the opportunity to put them in the ground. So
With the understanding, we're gonna follow Mass DEP, those restrictions right there.
But the point is that, as a community, do we want gas tanks exposed on top of the ground, or should we put them under the ground? And that to me is the bigger question at this point. And I think, in all probability, we would want to put them underground, especially if we have all the new technology today to monitor and make sure that they're okay.
I'll yield. Go ahead.
No, you can go, Tom. Age before beauty.
Yeah, thank you. Is that it's only the gas tank thing that they want to change? I'd be more concerned about the traffic pattern. That particular portion of town is a disaster. And now you've got 12 pumps
Sir?
where you'd have at least, well, let me finish, then you can say sir. That would be a disaster from a traffic standpoint. I know the tanks would probably be a disaster too, but with the technology, maybe I could sleep better at night. But adding possibility of 12 cars in there at any one time, okay? I know how the one in Attleboro, that's a disaster, okay? If there isn't at least one accident a month, people trying to pull out and cross 2 lanes of traffic. Sometime go by there about 2:30 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon when school is getting out. And you tell me if somebody can get out of that gas station and cross and go west.
Yes.
They may be able to go east,
So-
but they're not gonna go west. That's a disaster.
Okay,
Okay,
so,
that would be my objection to it. If the tanks, and of course the planning board doesn't want the tanks there, that's fine. I'm not concerned about that. But I am concerned about that section. And right across the street is the senior center.
yep.
Okay, so they will play demolition derby. It'd be like pinball, them trying to
Well,
get
they
across the
actually,
street.
the planning board requested that we align our entrance and egress to that of the senior center.
Yeah, and what does that mean?
So
they
they
can
won't be
crash the
playing.
head-ons?
It's, hey, I don't vote them in.
But
So-
I'm just telling you, that would be my concern. That's why I would vote against it, for the traffic alone.
Right,
I'm not
but that-
anti-business, I'm just anti this, that's an anti-disaster.
Right, but that's not what I'm asking for.
I know what you're not asking for, but
Yeah.
I would vote it down. They just gave me an opportunity to vote it down, but if they came up with traffic, I'd vote it down for that alone. Because that to me is a disaster. It's a disaster now with nothing there.
I guess my question is, maybe more for Mike, do we know why the planning board didn't vote to approve this change to the bylaw if in the reality of our current environment, we probably don't want large gas tanks above ground, no matter where they are in town?
I have to wait until someone comes to a meeting from the planning board to fill it out.
Okay.
Do we know when they plan to vote on it?
Town meeting.
The planning board?
They did, they voted against it, so we don't know why.
Oh, all right. Thank you.
I mean,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do we, for some clarification, do we know, is this, is a change in the bylaw absolutely required for you to get what you need? So you can't get a variance, this has to be a change in the bylaw?
No, the ZBA issued us a variance for the signs, but this would have to be a modification.
There's no, okay,
Well, just the way it's written, it says no.
Yeah,
okay. So it has to be the bylaw that changes.
but back to this gentleman here.
We have other
There are 2 different professional surveys who have performed traffic studies based off of the counts, projected counts coming in, the peak hours of 7:30 a.m. to 8:45 a.m. for this corridor here at the high school and the elementary school. And then I think it was like 150 to 310 or something. Planning board has the report. And then they filter in how many cars are anticipated coming into Cumberland Farms. And what they actually look for is the gaps. So if you have 12 cars waiting to get out of Cumberland Farms, you have so much delay at the intersection of 123 and 140 that the delay as it filters back is going to start to open to let those cars out. So you're not going to be nose to nose noting when you're coming down from west to east, you're going to say, oh, that guy's got a signal on, he wants to get out. In a peak or a non-peak, you're just going to go by. But in a peak, what are you going to do? Get 1 car ahead of them? Maybe 2 cars ahead of them? So they build that in to their report.
I love statistics, okay? You can take them at any time of day, any time of the year, full moon, half moon, okay? 2:30, 2:45 on a Tuesday, when bingo's over at the senior center. You try to get across that street now, okay?
I lived it this morning.
Did you go to Bingo Tuesday? Come tomorrow. Stand outside there
Yeah.
and protect yourself.
Bob, I just want to, this project aside.
Yeah.
If I were a sitting member of the planning board, and I'm not saying they did this, but I might have your feelings about the Cumberland Farm coming to town. I might vote against it because this is the one solid thing I have against it. I'm not saying they did that. If I was sitting there, I might utilize that. Point of the matter is, let's not talk about this project at all. Let's talk about, do we want in Zone 3 above-ground tanks in the future? Because someone else is going to do it. He has, or they have the right now, that under a special permit, to put above-ground tanks. We don't want above-ground tanks. The zoning bylaw should be modified, and I was a supporter in '96, and I understand why we did it. Things have changed. They need to go underground. The technology's there. But you want them underground. And the reason is, my main reason is 9/11. I don't want people coming out of the senior center, driving across the street, running into gas tanks that are exposed to the elements. I mean, that scares the hell out of me right there. So, putting aside the present project, what you guys need to ask yourself is, do you want in Zone 3 above-ground tanks? Or do you want to modify it to say, by special permit, above-ground or underground tanks? Maybe that's all it takes. Or
Meeting the,
underground.
but meeting the current
They still need a
DEP.
special permit.
Yeah.
You still need a special permit.
We've used traffic as the whipping boy for every single project that comes up in this town.
Mm-hmm.
And personally, I'm tired of it, because if we want commercial development, that is gonna be a cost that we're gonna have to accept. So, and in my mind, this Cumberland Farms is not the gating factor. The center of town is still the gating factor. That's gonna be imposing the delays, not this new business. Whatever goes in there is gonna be a new business that's gonna have traffic, but it's not gonna be causing the problem. The center of town is gonna be causing the problem. So, I am really worried that everybody's gonna hear the word traffic and they're gonna vote it down because we all hate traffic. Yes, we all hate traffic, but we've got to move the town forward, and we've got to deal with that. So that means redoing this town center to tolerate the businesses we want in the center of town.
And sir,
And
you
if
know,
we shoot them down every time they come up, because there's gonna be some traffic, we're never gonna move forward, and the town is gonna stay exactly the way it was in 1996.
Right.
And
You know who's
and I
gonna
don't
pay
want
for
that
that?
anymore.
Cumberland Farms and Taco Bell, right? We want them to pay for it, not us.
Steve, do you have
Yeah, just, like, does the fire department give any input on the underground tanks and all that, and they're fine with the current, I guess, standards, if you will? And then I agree with Walter, I think it's time to look, we keep talking about different parts of town and studies that we're doing, we got Leonard Street moving, going. We keep talking about a 5-10 year plan, does this kind of a project fit that plan? At least if we have it conceptually in our head, does that work, do we know?
I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, I'd just like to say that you take into account the traffic anytime you choose to shop somewhere. And if the traffic's so bad, you don't shop there.
For certain times a day.
Right. On.
Yes, I think you make a cogent argument, and this has been a really instructive discussion. I think it's two separate issues. One is whether or not the project works and people have concerns about
Yep.
traffic. I think whether or not we want to put underground tanks in Zone 3, change a bylaw, is the other
Yep.
discussion, and they just happen to be happening at the same time because of your proposal. My concern is that we typically, in cases like this, correct me if I'm wrong, defer to the decision of the board who is charged with evaluating all of these things. And I'm a member of the finance committee. I don't see any numbers I don't see any money. So I would then question, why did the planning board make this decision? I want to hear from them, and then I can have an opinion. However, I don't feel as though I'm necessarily as intelligent as I am. I don't necessarily feel like I'm as a member of FinCom, in a position to make that call.
Well, the process is.
Even if I have opinions about traffic and
Yeah,
radar
but
tanks and bylaws.
the process for me to get it on town floor is I have to get a recommendation from FinCom.
Not correct.
Or not I have to get a decision from FinCom.
And I understand that. What I'm saying is, it's difficult for me to feel equipped to do that without hearing from the planning board. Because I don't know right now why they've made the decision they made. I may disagree with it and therefore support a bylaw change that they're not supporting. However, right now, I don't have that information. So I feel sort of at a loss to vote on it.
I was gonna say something similar to Bonnie, that generally we do defer to the planning board, but in this instance, if someone from the planning board comes to us and says, well, we did it because we didn't want traffic, then I think we're within our rights to disagree with them if that is their rationale, but until we know, we kind of are in a holding pattern.
Well, the other thing is, we vote no, doesn't make any difference. You could stand up at town hall as a petitioner and move the article yourself.
I understand
and you'll
that.
get 15 people to stand up with you.
But it certainly behooves me and helps me
Well,
considerably to get FinCom.
But like they said, we usually yield to the planning board's decision. They're the professionals, so no, they look at what you tell them. All we're looking at is what you're telling us. There had to be a reason why, when who knows why. Until they come before us and tell us why, we know it was 5-2 against it.
Because right now, I don't understand why they voted against it.
Yeah.
Same thing. I think I'm just going to reiterate. I mean, we're dealing with two separate issues.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the you know what it's like? It's like the signage.
Yeah.
It's like the signage on the highway, right?
Got it.
We're talking about a specific project, or are we talking about a zoning bylaw? Right? So, we need to hear from. But we do understand the weight that our recommendation carries at town meeting, and for us to overturn a 5-2 decision by a board in town,
Yeah.
knowing the weight that's thrown behind that without understanding from them
Why?
the purpose of their declination to support this, I'm not comfortable doing that.
I just wanted to add, Mr. Cohen came to the Board of Selectmen meeting last Thursday on this issue as well, and we did defer it, and similar to your thoughts too, we asked that a planning board member be represented during our discussion, so I understand where you guys are coming from. We felt the same.
So by no means is it dead, but we clearly have to hear from the part of the town that's the expert in this
Yep.
issue to explain to us what they didn't like.
Yeah. So from a time standpoint, and town meeting being the 21st, who makes that come together?
The 21st. That's what usually
What do you
happens
mean?
with planning board articles.
So,
Yeah.
so don't you have your disposition prior to town meeting? So you know going into town meeting, Article 24, we're gonna support?
I wish that were true. Sometimes, there are 25 articles, we may have 20 of them. When it comes to these types of things, it depends on whether or not the boards have deliberated, and the boards have made decisions, and then they make the decision at 6 p.m., and we're asked to vote at 6:30, right before town meeting starts. So I echo your frustration,
Yeah.
and I agree with Walter that we make these things too difficult, but unfortunately, I feel like our hands are tied, and we should do everything we can to have a planning board member come before both boards and
Right.
give them that information. We have another meeting on Wednesday, for example, so I don't know if
Hopefully someone will be there.
This Wednesday?
this one's.
We have
So can I come back to that?
3 more meetings potentially.
Yeah. So
Wednesday, next Wednesday, and then
Monday.
the hour before the town meeting.
Okay, yeah.
So hopefully within one of those 3 meetings,
Yeah.
we can get our information.
Okay.
And the only thing that truly happens is if we don't have that information until that Monday, then yeah, it won't show up here that we voted yes or no. But if we're all in favor of it, then we move the article.
Yeah.
Right, but hopefully everyone remembers last time we tried to do a planning board motion at
Right.
the town meeting.
Yeah, yeah.
How confusing that was. So
Yeah.
I think that's last resort. That doesn't
Yeah.
look good
Yeah.
for transparency or for the townspeople what we're doing.
All right, so you have another one. Who chases planning board?
I will.
Okay.
What's that, Joe? Probably the chairman,
Yeah.
or any of the members can come.
Yeah.
I'll let him, email him, and he can let them all know.
Yeah. All right, folks.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And sorry.
Yeah, no sweat.
It's good information, though.
Great, thank you.
Pretty good.
I'm really sad about that Panera.
Yeah.
Panera is great.
Drive-through.
The newer
one.
ones.
Yes.
The newer ones.
Norton doesn't like drive-throughs.
Some do, some don't. The one in Attleboro does not. The one in Brockton does.
You're saying new ones have to?
All right. The next planning board article,
Oh, okay.
that you have before you, is their article, adding definitions that weren't in the bylaws before, and also amending the use table. So you can review that and be ready hopefully on Wednesday night when they come to you. There's a lot added, all the underlying information, and you can see the votes they took and made some changes to that at their meeting. And they also had two other petition articles. One article was to rezone the area on 140, the Triangle, Smith Street, and 140 to Village Commercial, and that was a petition article by the Riberos. And the planning board did vote in favor of that article. I think there was only one vote against it.
That's where the bank is
Beyond that, there's a map attached to the article in your one that you have tonight. It's hard to see from the copy. Bring color copies Wednesday night. There's a couple vacant lots there now, and there's,
next to what used to be
It's
the
all-
karate studio.
right,
So that land.
yeah, it's
on
all
the
zone,
south.
and it's all zone commercial right now.
Yeah.
And this will make it village commercial, so they could have housing and business on that property.
Okay.
And the other petition article, oops,
Sorry,
go ahead.
just a quick question. Does it abut other village commercial zones, or are we just gonna have this weird random village commercial spot?
I think what happened was, previously we rezoned 140 to village
Right.
commercial going that way.
We just missed
And-
those parcels or
right.
something? Okay.
This is for the area completely encompassed in between Smith Street that meets at two spots on 140 and 140.
I believe that's the area, yep.
It's just that, it's that
It's here.
pocket right there. So there's Smith Street.
Yeah.
Whoops, there's Smith Street
The bank's up
and
here.
140 and that's Rose Brothers.
Yeah. So the bank is right there.
Yeah.
So
The
we're
bank,
not
the
talking-
bank is in that pocket.
Are we talking that pocket or this end? You know, that right there where it's vacant land.
Yeah, we need a better map.
Yeah. I'm thinking of
Bring color maps to the next one.
Or just crosshatch or something, but, you know, some visual cue.
Because it's the other side.
What zone village
So it's in there, it's
commercial?
not that whole.
Yes, it's not that whole street bank on one end to the empty water on the other. It's just the empty water.
Right, right. And,
Kind of across the water from Emmons.
exactly.
Yeah.
But it's, right. Okay. On the west side of 140.
Yeah.
So make sure you have better maps for Wednesday night. And the other article was also submitted by the Riveros, and that was to allow duplexes in commercial zone, and they voted against the residential housing in a commercial zone.
They voted against a change to allow it?
Yeah.
Planning would be here Wednesday, so we can dig deeper.
The chairman of the planning board will come, and you'll see if any members can come.
Okay.
On the other bylaw that's listed there, the stormwater management bylaw, we're gonna hold off on that until May. There's just too much work to be done, and we really wanna have education sessions with the public before it's on, it goes up for a vote, so it'll give us time to finish up some of the work we have to do and have public meetings on it in advance. And do you want to vote on any articles tonight, or you want to wait?
Anyone?
Do we wanna vote on the one for Bob, or we wanna wait until we can get a hold of Dr. Vieta?
I think we want to get
When's
a
he-
hold of Dr. Vieta.
I don't know when he's back from
Yeah,
China.
when's he back?
Cause they just left.
Is it a week, is it 2 weeks, is it?
Well, for the school committee,
Right.
Can it be
Go on.
email? Can we
I
get
mean,
a-
we're gonna see Sherry and
Tomorrow.
Dinesh tomorrow at the ad hoc.
Yeah, so I'll
You can
wait
ask
until
them.
Wednesday for that,
Sure.
just so we can get a maybe answer. Walter?
I was just curious, are the budget supplements finalized now, this Article 3, are these numbers good?
Yeah.
Is it? Okay, great.
Going to, well, vote on anything we can.
Well, how about Article 2, separation expense?
Yep.
The proposal is $45,000, and this is for sick and vacation buyback for the cost in the fire department. And I propose using $45,000 of free cash to fund that.
Like, how many people does that represent, and how much sick time, vacation time? One person, and that's how many weeks of sick time and
I'll
vacation?
get you that. Total days. Let's see if I have, I don't think I have it with me.
Can we vote on 3?
Is that a deal killer to vote on too? Because if it's contractual,
Oh, right.
Right, we just might wanna have the information. Is that what you're asking for, Steve, or do you?
That's all I'm looking for is info, and then,
But do you feel like you need it to vote?
I think we can vote.
yeah.
We're gonna change it, right?
No.
45K.
Right.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman,
Tom?
I move we move Article 2 in the amount of $45,000 from free cash.
I'll second it.
Motion and a second.
who seconded, I'm sorry.
I did.
To recommend Article 2, 45,000 from free cash for separation expense. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Unanimous?
do OPEB and stabilization and capital.
Yeah, we love those. Where's Paul? Can we call him?
Good.
Do that last, maybe he's driving there right now.
Article 6 is capital improvement funding. And my recommendation would be $1,254,544 of free cash go into the capital improvement fund.
Can you say that number again?
Sure. $1,254,544.
I can ask where that number
Do you have the
came from.
breakdown of
Yeah, was it?
the projects?
No, not yet. They meet again Wednesday night.
So we don't have the detail as to what the 1,000,002 covered?
It's not, no, it's not, it's putting it into the capital fund, it's not funding any projects yet.
What is the balance in the capital improvements?
It's on the sheet, 4 million.
Did I miss it? Yeah, I probably did.
Free cash.
That's free
Oh,
cash.
capital.
Yeah, capital improvements again.
I didn't put my capital folder, Tom,
Alright.
sorry.
Okay. Can't do much.
No. Just an odd number, but, yeah. The motion sometimes.
So what is the number based on? Is it like a certain percentage of the free cash?
Yeah. Yeah, we, what we've done in the, last year, with the free cash, we used 3% for OPEB. We used, 10% for stabilization, and we used 20 to 25% for, capital. Or was it 30? Are we close to 30%?
So is that what we did, we just took 30% for
Yep.
capital, this number? What for stabilization?
Stabilization's 10%?
10%. OPEB was 3%?
Yeah, I went a
Kinda
little
round.
less because I didn't think you'd go for
Kinda rounded.
3% this year. It's 10,000 more than we put in last year. Last year you put in 90,000, so.
That's the idea, right? We always want to be going up. So, but, big leaps, make it easier to move people.
I think the
Without-
suggestion was going up 10 last year, and we went up 5 to appease Paul.
Right, without Paul being here, I'm gonna say is.
Double it.
No. Having my
Double or
inner,
nothing.
inner Paul voice, do we want to go from 5 to 10? Because then we're pretty much saying next year is 10 at a minimum, as is the year after and the year after. Because you don't want to go 10 this year and then 5 next year.
It's like snow removal.
Right.
You have to keep it close or else you have to keep whatever you put it
You go backwards, it's gonna look bad. So you either wanna keep it steady, or if you're going up 10 this year, you have to have in the back of your head that next year, unless there's some catastrophe, you're gonna be doing 10. That's all I'm saying.
Mike,
Yeah.
what do we get out of doing 10 instead of 5?
Just showing a little more effort.
5 it is.
When we go to borrow, they'll look at that.
They do.
Okay, but like, I guess
Watch
that is the question, right? Does spending, an extra 10 now instead of 5 have potential to be a win for us financially in any way?
It would. When the Standard & Poor's looks at you, they wanna see that you're maintaining your reserves, they wanna see that you're making an effort in capital, and that's all what your interest rate is based on.
You could say that same theory, just put it in 5.
Right.
Yeah, but if your free cash is bigger though,
Right.
and then they'll look at it the other way going, well, you had more free cash this year, and you still only put in 5, what's up? So,
Well, they'll burn us on that when we have less free cash.
well, that's what I'm saying. If you do 10 this year.
What we're working on now, they really, are encouraging us to do when we talk with Standard & Poor's. They want a financial, commitment. They want us to have, rules and regulations that we're working on right now that would say, when you have free cash, X percent is gonna go here, X percent is gonna go there, X percent, and stick by that.
So so as free cash goes up and down,
Right.
are they saying that as long as you put in
Your percentage.
8%, whether that's 10,000 or 2,000,
Right.
they don't care, it's just that you put in the 8%? All right, then. That's easier.
Where do they need that percent to be?
They don't judge, you know,
So we
we set it.
And they're just looking for a policy, a standard policy
Policy,
that you can,
yep.
like an investment policy.
Yeah.
You won't-
Policy
Yeah, okay.
Exactly.
That makes sense, you check the box.
That's still
Yeah.
making me feel very comfortable with 5.
I'm with you.
Awesome.
I'm
Seems
going
very
less actually,
exciting.
the more we talk.
No, you can't do that.
You can, but we choose not to.
All right, so
This is
let's
just
get back to
percentages.
Article 6. Article 6.
The capital?
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I move $1,254,544 to the capital account, and that's from free cash money,
Yeah.
from free cash.
Motion and a second to recommend funding Article 6 in the amount of $1,254,544 to come from free cash. Any further discussion? Steve?
Like next week, we could have the balances after we make our votes on these funds. Yes.
Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you.
And Article 23 is OPEB.
Mr. Chairman.
Steve.
Don't have to get here, I recommend moving $95,000 from free cash to fund OPEB. And that's the last year plus 5,000 instead of 10,000.
But that is contrary to what percentage are you trying to do?
Last year was 30%.
3%? Okay, I have a motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to recommend Article 23?
4.
23, you're right.
Mike Crowley,
23.
23.
Stabilization.
To fund OPEB, other post-employment benefits to the tune of 95,000. Steve, quick math, what percentage is that of the free cash?
We'll
Quiz
leave that to the
time.
bankers in the room.
Wait a minute.
I don't have a calculator with me.
You have a phone.
No HP.
Should be one on your smartphone.
Yeah, I know. I'm getting to it.
Not very smart.
You don't have a phone.
Couple of days now.
I know. Really? I'm helping you. That's what I do.
2.2%, I think.
It didn't change.
How much?
2.2%. Which is an odd percentage. So I have a motion, who seconded? Bonnie? Motion and a second to, recommend Article 23 in the amount of 95,000, just 5,000 more than last year, 5,000 less than is being recommended by the town manager. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All those opposed? 2 opposed. Thank you.
And the last article is stabilization. $418,181.
Mr. Chairman,
Steve?
the motion that we move $418,181 to the stabilization fund from free cash.
Second.
Motion and a second on Article 24. 24 to fund $418,181, which is 10% of our free cash. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Unanimous?
Article 3, do you want to vote tonight, or do you have all the backup? Yeah, so why don't we do that Wednesday night?
Did the selectmen vote on this?
On what?
Article 3?
No, we just finished all the numbers.
That it?
That's it.
Amy,
I have a sneaking suspicion that our guests that are still here
for a reason.
might be joining us because the original posted agenda had acquisition of real estate on it. And it's not on the agenda that was passed out tonight, but I have a feeling that based on the posted agenda, the people in the gallery might have some things to share with us. So as to not waste their time joining us for another meeting, perhaps we should invite them to say what they've got on their minds.
The floor is open.
Well, I was just gonna say, I noticed on your agenda that it was the acquisition of real estate. And I also noticed that it was sponsored by the Board of Selectmen and the Building Committee, so I'm here to recommend, to represent the Building Committee at an article that I guess we are co-sponsoring? That I did not know?
And just the Board of Selectmen also hasn't taken a vote on either of these two articles yet.
So while we haven't formally taken a vote on the articles,
Yeah.
we did discuss these articles with the permanent building committee when they were presented to us about a month ago. Specifically for the purchase of the acquisition of land. Mike, the address?
The property abutting the town hall. Mike's really exact address.
And our discussion centered around wanting more information before we made a decision to spend potentially $1 million in an acquisition of that property. The conversation we had also led to more specific information that was written into Article 6 on the special town meeting as well, so that the permanent building committee could go forward with a site selection process. That was the $140,000 split up 70 and 70 that I believe we voted on last meeting.
Yep.
So we have yet to vote on that one formally as well. We did ask for some revisions to that I believe, Mike, you're gonna have a draft form to us next week.
And the revisions were just to make the language a bit more general.
On Article 6?
6 on the special,
Yes.
Yeah.
to give them the flexibility to do the concept designs on whichever property they ultimately recommend, not tied to a specific property that may or may not be purchased now or in the future.
Okay. And the issues with the land between the town hall and the police station?
Well, at the selectmen's meeting, it was asked, they wanted to see that the buildings could fit behind the town hall and on that property, and the architect prepared a sketch that was given to the selectmen at last Thursday's meeting, showing the location of the town hall on the vacant property and the senior center behind the town hall.
And they both fit, and there was adequate parking, and
I don't believe that's been demonstrated yet.
Yeah, that's.
I don't believe that's been demonstrated yet. So this took the footprints of the buildings that were designed for the Elm Street location and plopped them within the property boundaries
Yep.
of the existing town hall site and the proposed property. What it doesn't address is any of the grading issues. It doesn't talk about parking. It's just physically the shapes of the buildings as they were designed originally do seem to fit within this. My personal opinion is I think we need more time to study and see how well these sites would work for one or both. But again, we haven't taken a formal vote on that yet.
And I couldn't jump in here. So you have now 4 municipal buildings altogether. Is there some sort of road, kind of going through them to bring traffic in one direction, or, something like that? Or is it just, hey, if I want to go to the town hall, I'll cut you off here and
Speak for yourself.
I was thinking the same thing.
Well, that's a major
We're gonna
traffic
put you out there with an
problem.
orange flag, it'll be
You might be the
great.
problem.
I think you're hitting the nail on the head why we said we wanted to have more information. But please let.
Yeah, the building committee, that piece of property is one site that the building committee is looking at among several that we do want to do the site survey for, to know where the best place is to put these buildings. At our last building committee meeting, it was a 4 in favor, 1 abstained on asking Mike to present to the selectmen the possibility of purchasing this property, not necessarily for a municipal building, but because it is a strategic property. But for the building committee, we haven't completed our work to determine if that is the proper site for a town hall or a council on aging. We're still in the process. As soon as Article 6 in the special is hopefully successful, we will go out for an RFQ, get a determination of 5 or 6 properties that we're currently looking at, have them evaluated. We will then send 3 or 4 recommendations to the Board of Selectmen, and then it will be their choice where these municipal buildings go. So that's where the municipal building committee is right now. We want to take the time to do it right. So.
Amy?
I appreciate that. The one thing that I'm wondering about is, I understand the strategic nature of this piece of property. It's pretty obvious from anyone who's ever driven along there. But the question I have is, where are we gonna come up with the $1 million to pay for it if we can't take it out of the town hall fund?
That's not the building committee's call.
I'm looking at the town
It would be
manager.
borrowed.
Because it would seem like we can't just move that money and buy it for strategic purposes if we don't know for sure we're gonna use it for the town hall and community center.
Well, I think there can always be an article on, in front of the townspeople to say, for strategic reasons, even though we don't have a today use for it, to spend $1 million to lock it up. So I think you can do that. It might be a hard sell, but it can be done.
You could, and at that point, I would request that the building committee's name be withdrawn from the article of support, since that's not within our purview.
Right.
And so that's not our business. And it just seems like the building committee is going in that direction when we have not decided to go in that direction. And I wouldn't want any language on a town meeting warrant to confuse the voters.
So how much, again, the time issue always comes up. How much time do you need to evaluate whether purchasing that parcel then works for the needs of the town?
The building committee will be moving forward with our site assessment plans and hope to be able to go to the town meeting at the annual in April or May, with a recommendation for a site for the new town hall and the Council on Aging. If this particular piece of property is one of the ones that the building committee happens to present to the Board of Selectmen for their final decision on where to put it, then at that point in time, the building committee itself would be recommending the purchase of the property, but not before.
I think you made a comment about purchasing these for a municipal complex. Sorry, I have my comment. I would.
Well, that's what was.
No, you said specifically it was around the time that Dinah said they would remove the PVC
Oh,
as a sponsor.
It was a strategic acquisition.
That's what it was.
Right.
So
Strategic acquisition.
right, I was just gonna provide you with the same comment that I said at the Board of Selectmen meeting about, this is a piece of property in between the fire station and police station. Like, I personally don't see a need to rush on this. I don't see somebody running to say, hey, I wanna purchase this property and be right in the middle of two town buildings. So, and again, it's my personal opinion, like, I don't feel the need to rush into this, and, I've obviously said in both meetings to the permanent building committee that my focus is that there are options that are presented to the townspeople, so that we're not going into this, like in a tunnel in a vacuum to look at one property again, and then find out that, an additional $5 million is needed because of something that we didn't evaluate the first time.
Yep.
Or that we've dedicated our plans and hopes and dreams to land that we don't yet own. Which would be a whoops.
Walter, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, kind of just to the side layman's question is, we've heard the $1 million thrown around. Is that reasonable market value for that piece of property?
That's a great question. It's actually something that I believe was asked as a follow-up for Mike to do, and I can't remember from whom.
How many acres is it?
I think real estate's just tricky to value because it's all about what someone is willing to pay for the location. And I think that property is worth more to some than others. So it's sort of.
I know somewhere else in town, they were looking to put a convenience store in with a gas station. On a smaller lot than that one, and there was an offer of 1.5 million.
Well, that's good to know. Yeah, okay. All right, that helps. Thanks.
Mike, is there someone else looking to purchase that property? Does the seller want to sell to somebody else? Is there competition there? Like, why would there be? an interest for us to get it
The,
for our
the only
purposes.
thing I heard from the seller was the seller came in and met with the planning director with a concept to put in what he called a dormitory for Wheaton, and I said, I don't think Wheaton needs any dorm space, so I don't know whether it was meant to be for the place across the street, or if they're just gonna try and put apartments there. But other than that, I don't know if anyone looking to buy it.
Building apartments next to a fire station.
It's convenient.
If you're on fire.
Imagine the traffic.
Then
If
you're
you're
next
trying
to
to
it.
Oh my God, Tom.
Except the fire engines.
The fire engine, they could just run them.
Aren't you glad I'm
Good.
back?
Pull the hose.
So good, we missed you so much.
So there's two articles regarding real estate. So I understood Article 11 to be about the property that we're primarily discussing. I have no idea what Article 12 was. Is that just a placeholder, Mike? Okay. So is there anything being considered for that one at this time? Or is that?
Just because there were two parcels that were available on Main Street, and you know, at the meeting with the building committee, when they said that that parcel next to the town hall was the one they were focused on, to concentrate on that, we just stopped with the other one.
We said we were very interested in it. I don't think we said we were focusing on it. If I remember, but we were excited about it, but we still want to, we wanna look at everything before we make a recommendation.
So, if your timeline is the spring meeting, then assuming Dr. Byetta can't get us the information, Bob's article and his timeline fits in beautifully. If he's trying to get information, do we need buildings, and have that answered by March.
It would fit. The Yale School is not something the building committee has looked at or considered.
Well, I'm not saying.
Yeah, I'm just-
Any of the buildings, I'm just.
Yeah, I'm just throwing that out, you know, that.
All right then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody have anything else? I don't think we have minutes to review. Tom?
Seeing as it's 18 minutes after my bedtime, I move we adjourn.
Second.
Motion and a second to adjourn and to meet up again on Wednesday.
Here or there?
Town Hall. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you.